G'day, welcome to David Joshua Ford Live. This is episode 102, and on today's show we're taking a look at building a 16U rack. If you've been following this channel for a couple of years, you would know that previously I've built out a 4U rack, which is down here. I'll show you in a second. So I want to go over that and talk about what I've really enjoyed about that case. But then, you add more things and you need more space. And so now I'm looking at building a 16U rack or two 8U racks really, and want to look at something that is both something that can live in the studio permanently, but also can be taken on the road. So I'm going to go through some of my decisions. I, as of yesterday, pulled apart the entire rack, and so the whole studio is in pieces here. And so I've had to patch this show together using an A10 Mini Pro that I had in the drawer. So I pulled that out and the whole show is running on an A10 Mini Pro, which is a nice kind of stepping back to some of the constraints that I had back in probably 2021. If you're new here, this channel is all about production, live streaming, photography, video production. So if you have any questions related to that, let me know, and let me know as we go along today talking about the rack. Do chime in with anything that you see that you want to know more of in the racks that we're building here. And also just let me know where you're from. Where in the world are you joining from today? Got a couple of people here. I saw we had Elvis from Jersey, we had Mike from Wisconsin, and we have Steve from Northern California. So welcome to all of you guys, and let's kick off. So the first part that I wanted to talk about was my previous 4U rack. That's the one that I've featured on the channel here a lot. This is what I've been using since, I think it was 2022 that I built that, and that's this guy down here. Just gonna jump down here. So I've gutted this as of yesterday, and hence why the studio is a mess. This is an SKB, I'll look it up in a second, but it's like a 4U rack. And what's nice about it is it's got this section up the top where you could basically put a laptop sort of facing forward. This is the front side. And then there's some holes here which you can bring up some cables from below, so that makes it really neat if you wanted to, for example, keep the sort of back plate on, some of that kind of stuff. And it's got this nice sort of carpet at the top, which makes it just feel a bit softer to use. Some Velcro things to sort of keep all of your things in place. I was using it with my, I'll just grab this down here, my ATEM Extreme. I just plonked so I had a 2ME Constellation in here with my main switching, web presenter and all that kind of stuff. And then my ATEM SDI Extreme ISO, I just had sitting on top, and all of these cables were feeding into the hole. And I'm using the ATEM Extreme ISO as basically as an 8-track video recorder. But for smaller jobs, it meant that this device was very accessible, so I could just sort of strip all the SDI out and then take this on the road if I wanted to do a smaller job where I didn't need the whole case. So it sort of kept it sort of more accessible for using it for different jobs, where you don't necessarily need to take a bigger rack. One of the nice things about this rack too is that you can basically deconstruct it. So the front panels and the back panels come off, so you can have your sort of front buttons here and then your cables coming out in the back. But you can also just take off the whole top piece here. And I found some trays like this Mid-Atlantic 14-inch one, I think, that are really sort of good length of being lightweight, can pass air through it, run the length of the rack. So this will probably, I'm trying to work out what to do with this rack now that I've gotten rid of it. But this is what was there, and it just made it easier to kind of build it from the ground up without having some permanently placed lid there. So easy access to get in and out of it. And it has served me well. But life goes on, and we keep buying more equipment, and we get new things that we want to fit into there. And so the 4U rack space wasn't enough, mostly because I've been looking at upgrading the audio for a long period of time, and was looking at sort of a 1U device, but then ended up settling on the Behringer Wing, which is a 4U rack space. So that would have filled up the old rack entirely and had no room for video switching or the network router type stuff that needs to go into there. So that has led me on to this one, which is another SKB rack. It's a shallow 8U rack, and I've gone with a shallow rack because I'm trying to avoid too much patching on the back. So if you've got like a deeper rack, if you have like a Constellation, then you don't want to like reach all the way into a rack, and so you need more patching. This is the front, this is the back here. Started putting in some of the panels from the old rack in there. So I got a bunch of like 10 SDI out, some HDMI ins here. So I'm still going to keep this patching on the back, but I wanted to get a bit more of, let me see if I can get to this one down here. Putting in more of a converter page, which panel, which can just convert SDI to HDMI and some NDI and Apple TV, and just like sort of lay these out in a rack. So that's kind of what that's what I'm sort of working towards and trying to sort of fit all of that into. So we'll go through some of the ways in which I have been planning this rack, and then we'll look at all of the different components that we have in here. So I usually start in a spreadsheet, and I'll sort of list out the equipment that I have or need. So for example, these are all the racks, and then I had video equipment and audio equipment, and I think I had some computing stuff in there as well. So this was my 4U one that I've got already. So that was about, what was that, $425. You get the idea of like 4U down the bottom, and you can have a laptop on the top. So that has served me well, but you know, I think I might even like sell that off and get like a smaller one, because getting this sort of smaller form factor for an Extreme would be really interesting. So that's what I had, and then I was sort of going through a bunch of these different, racks, and there was a live stream back in January that you could go back on this channel and look at, which went through all of this in detail. So I'm going to skip over this just a little bit. But I was looking at, you know, things getting up to like a 12U. I just click over here. But these are getting to like big, heavy boxes that don't have wheels on them, and you know, just getting a lot bigger to transport. So something like a 12U, I could probably fit into a 10U in a pinch, but because this one's a little bit deeper than the shallow racks, so you can put more on the back side of it. But this is what I've not decided to go with, and instead I went with this one. So the one that I was showing you here before is about $340. This is what it looks like when it is has the front and back sides on it. So it's got some sort of butterfly latches, and then it's also got a handle to pull it up and some wheels, so it can easily you can wheel it around on, like if you're at a venue, don't have to worry too much about having two people to transport it. And then the shallowness of it was actually sort of an interesting thing for me, because I was, as I said, I don't want to reach too far into the rack to do too much patching. And also I was curious if the Behringer wing, which I've got here and I can show you in a bit, would fit in one of these, and I think it does. I've got to test the back end of the cables, but I look at the specs of these sheets and they look longer than it should be able to fit, but some of the wings length is actually on the front end. So the Behringer wing, which is a 4U audio mixer, actually fits in this device here. So my 16U plan has been to get two of these 8 RUs, and one for video, one for audio, so that they can kind of live together, but I can also sort of separate them out as needed between a video person and someone running audio, or just stack them together, and then maybe one person could do a show depending on how big it is. So that's the rack that we've got. As I said, I've only just got one at the moment. I'm going to build out the video one and then do the audio one next. So that's what I'm working with on the racks. Then we go back over to So that was the one I chose. And then the video equipment, it's just kind of listing out in green here, which maybe doesn't show up on the A10 Mini very well with the colors, is the things that I have. So the Constellation, Hyperdeck, A10 Extreme ISO, Mac Mini, Cloud Pod, a 10 gigabit switch, fans, Stream Deck Studios, Apple TV, bidirectional converters, like all these sort of things that I have, and then potentially some things that I might want to get, like I don't have this one, but I'm sort of curious to check out maybe like a 2U monitor. Most of how I've designed this rack is more for treating it like a brain, and then you just sort of have a monitor and a laptop sitting on a desk, so it kind of keeps your workspace clear. So I don't necessarily need those monitors, but it's something where it would be nice in a pinch just to be able to, dump a box on a, on a chair or on whatever it is, and just be able to switch a show with the Stream Deck Studio and some monitors, and for short things, something, if you're setting up for the whole day, you probably want to have more of a chair and a desk situation. All right, so that is some of what I'm trying to fit in there. And then the audio equipment, for a long time I was toying around with the M32C. So this was, the advantage here is it's quite small. So it's just kind of the core brain here, and then you'd get a stage box separately to plug in microphones. But it would mean that within the audio, within the rack, I could probably keep it much more smaller and just take up like 1 unit space rather than 4. If I click on the, where are we? The wings, this is the one that I have ended up getting. It's much more of a big boy. Also the price has just gone up. You'll see it used to be $1,600, now it's $1,800. I guess that's tariffs or something like that. I was able to get it just before the price went up. But so this 4U would basically take up the entire previous rack that I had, so I needed more space. And so I figured I'll just separate this out into two racks, one for audio, one for video. So that is the wing, and I just sort of landed on that because, not that, I guess this is still sort of current, the M32, X32, but I just felt like the wing was probably a bit more future-proofing, because, the things that I'm investing in, but also the things that I'm building for in terms of being able to control it with Companion, I want to make sure that it's, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it's sort of a pathway that is going to serve me better. So hence why I just sort of, bit the bullet with the space in terms of using more space. But the wing, even though it's got that price jump, I think is still amazing value for what you get in there. We can go over that in a bit. So these are all of the things that I have to then fit into a rack. So my next port of call is sort of building out a side view of, this is like the front of the rack and this is the back of the rack. And I usually just space my cells, if I go, where are we, resize row, to 58 pixels. Because if you multiply that by 3, you get 1.74, sort of 1.75, so that's, which is the height of 1U. So it just kind of helps from a planning stage to have like, so 1U is 1.75 inches, and that is 3 boxes here, and then I sort of have the same across there. So I can sort of do a rough sketch of, like, if I put a fan here, how deep is it going to be, and can I put some computing things on the back end of that? If I have a screen, how big is that? And you sort of got to account for, cables coming out. And then it should also help with things like, I'm trying to get a Stream Deck Studio here opposite the Extreme. So the Extreme's cables will be facing out the back, and the Stream Deck Studio is just a flat edge. The cables come out the sides, so that should fit. And then there's always some gotchas, which is like the Constellation, I think when I looked it up, it said it was more like 8 inches or something, but it's actually the same as the Hyperdeck and the Web Presenter, which have this terrible tray, and this pokes out the back here. And so what I'm trying to figure out is how to get my converters, I'm going to have to shuffle some things around. So I think what I'm probably going to do is maybe ditch the monitor for now, because I don't really need it, because I don't really work that way, and maybe sort of move some of the devices up in the rack. So it's kind of how I sort of just move components around, play Tetris, and just sort of try and fit everything into the rack. So then we've got Hyperdeck Web Presenter, power conditioner, which I still actually need to get because I want to sort of get a full length one, and then my patch bays down the bottom here. All right, so that brings me to third part, which is looking at the rack components. So I just want to go through the actual hardware and sort of talk through some of the things of what I'm trying to fit in there in the real world. So this was the rack that I was talking about. This is the back side. We'll swing it around. Where are we? So I've got the AC Infinity fan here, which I had in the previous one, on the back side just to save space, but I kind of want to put it in the front just so I can see the display and sort of get an idea of that. I do have a 12 volt switch down here so I can turn the fan on and off. And then the next one I have is Stream Deck Studio, which would ideally be a little bit lower if screens are above it, so you could sort of switch while looking at screens. So I'll just play with that. You know, maybe if I do put a screen in here, I'll move the AC to the back. We'll see how we're going there. And then I've got what was my next one? So the Stream Deck Studio, which, because this is PoE, although actually there is a Mac Mini that will be in the box, so I could just plug in USB, but Ethernet connection for the Stream Deck Studio means that it's pretty, it can just sort of run in the box without needing a computer, even though I have one in there. All right, so that is that, and then what else we got? So I'll show you these ones. I can get these ones over here. Okay, so this is the main video portion of what I've got going on here. So I've got the Constellation 2ME HD on top here, and then I've got the Web Presenter and the Hyperdeck. The Hyperdeck and the Web Presenter are held together with, let's put that one up there, a terrible tray, which, I don't know, Blackmagic makes this $20 universal tray, which is not very universal because there were 2 screws for the Web Presenter, but only 1 for the Hyperdeck. So it's not it does wiggle a little bit, and it's heavier than it needs to be. I wish that there was an option for some rack ears here that could kind of span the gap between a half and a third. But so this tray is quite heavy, but because I've got quite a shallow rack that I'm working with, this back section here is, as I think you saw in the diagram on the computer, is kind of cutting into where I want to put the converters. So I think I might need to raise this up to get the converters underneath, and it's kind of getting in the way of reaching into the rack, which is annoying. So that'll be, I think, on the lower side, and then on the upper side will be the Constellation. Pop that one down. And the way I'm using the Constellation is that's my primary switcher. I just pop this guy in here. So that'll be in there. That's right. There we go. We'll just rest that there for the moment. And then remember I had the ATEM Extreme, which I'm using as a recorder. So that means on the back side, I'm actually just not pressing any of the buttons on here. I'm controlling it all through Companion, and that's just going to sit on the back side. So there's a tray like this Middle Atlantic, I think it's 8 inches, which I quite like because it's got this sort of recessed edge here. So it'll actually sit further back, and that'll probably just catch the edge of the Constellation for a bit of support. And then this Extreme will sit on the back side so that all of the SDI cables can just patch into the Constellation. So I can go out of the Constellation and record ISOs into the Extreme ISO. And then that's also my backup encoder Extreming if I need that. So that's kind of how this will sit along the back. And converters more along here, extreme, and then more computing parts along the top, just in terms of trying to juggle things in the box. I'm just going to get rid of this guy and get rid of this tray and get rid of the Constellation. Make sure I don't drag out anything. These are all the patch cables from my previous installation. Get rid of that over there. All right, so this is the back side of it. I've got another patch panel here which has the 10 SDI out and a bunch of HDMI. I think I showed you that one before. Internet in. And then on the front side, it's a bit more sort of computer oriented, of like USBs and USB-Cs and some for power, and a couple of HDMIs for more kind of domestic monitors. And then I've also got some 12-volt switches here. I used to have a Pi in the rack, but now I've got the Mac Mini. So this is going to be sitting up here inside in the heart, and it's going to run everything in the studio, and it's going to be in the rack so that when I go on the road, the whole, the Mac Mini and a router is basically kind of the heart of running a consistent show, so that it's all got to travel in the one unit. So that is going to be in there. I've taken out the Raspberry Pi, just kind of done with it. And so I can use that for something else. And got a couple more 12-volt outputs here, which is useful for monitors or stuff like that. And some headphones out here too. So that's the front side of it, which I can move back. So that is the front side of it. Now let's take a look at down here. So this is called a black rack, and there's 16 of these cutouts here so that these bidirectional converters can be screwed sort of side by side. So I quite like this layout, although it's probably like a little bit longer than helps for this shallow rack. So I'm still trying to work out that, but this is basically giving me 6 bidirectional in and out conversions. So, 6 SDI to HDMI and HDMI to SDI, so 12, I guess, pathways. And then I got some, HDMI splitters just to have, more screen runs if I need. We've got NDI, like a PoE to NDI to HDMI out that I have, and I'm sort of just using that for cameras. And then some USB things. I've got an old Apple TV, which I'm going to get a new one whenever they release the new one. This one's a bit long in the tooth, but that's just useful for connecting screens if you need in a pinch from Macs. And then a bunch of sort of USB-C powers. And then this rack here is another black rack, but it's more of a sort of flat sitting one. And I'm not using this very well at the moment, but so I've got a 10 gigabit switch, which the Mac Mini's got a 10 gigabit on it. So somewhere in the rack, I'm going to have a 10 gigabit switch. And what's nice about these ones, if I can pick it up, let me just show you what's going on here. Still have the plastic on it. Whereas this rack sort of mounting things vertically, this one they're sitting flat. So things like the streaming bridge, I could get that in here. So zip tie in the way. And then you'll see that these screws actually line up here. So depending on the size, you could have, one big one for a streaming bridge, or I could get 2 of the smaller bidirectional ones and sort of stack them like that between each side. Excuse me. So I'm just sort of experimenting with that and just sort of seeing how much space that takes up in the rack, because it's still, depending on where I place it, that ledge from the Blackmagic universal shelf is a bit of a pain. So that's sort of another way of doing these racks. And then I'm also just toying up the idea of maybe just not even using these, because these are probably $130 each. And alternatively, I could just use a more general shelf and put some double lock, or what do you call it? Like this stuff. The dual lock sticky stuff, so that they can just stick to the shelf. You have more airflow, and it's lighter as a shelf, and it's cheaper. And also it means if I need to, it's easier to pull out devices. But I quite like the idea of them being permanently installed here rather than moving around. And then the other one that I'm going to bring over, at least for the moment, I might get a Ubiquiti one at the moment, but I've had for a while this Netgear 16-port PoE switch. So this is unmanaged, so can't really manage it within the Ubiquiti router, but the devices show up fine. And this big boy here, which is 200 watts of power that's going into the PoE, means that I just have a ton of options for PoE. So I plug in the Canon cameras, and the OBSpot cameras are all PoE powered. The ArtNet sort of lighting adapter, the NDI converter, some switches, all that kind of stuff are running through here with the PoE, and it just makes it much more convenient to have just this in a rack rather than having to, put a network cable as well as power to a lot of devices. So there's some of the racks that will go on the back end of that. And then I've got racks everywhere. I was talking about this last week as well. The Blackmagic Design Cloud Pod, which is a 10 gigabit Ethernet and has 2 USB ports here. So you can plug in any sort of SSD into that. And so it's just a really nice portable way to get a 5 gigabit network attached storage. So I've been using that for my editing workflow, but it also means that when I take these racks on the road, that I've got a lot of sort of fast storage and access to just sort of fast networking. So I think this Cloud Pod is also going to live somewhere in the rack with the computing elements, and that is that one. And I think that's about, this is probably the most bit of the rack from what I've seen. Converters, I've showed you that kind of stuff. The main challenge I'm having at the moment is just like I was saying, the Blackmagic universal shelf is longer than I had anticipated, and that's kind of cutting into my converters. But otherwise, things are progressing and just sort of building this out that way. Couple of quick comments. Streamcatcher Society is joining. Good to have you here. What else we got? I'll make sure I didn't miss anyone. Emerald Audiovisual from Ireland, welcome. And Emerald says, spotted right, you got a wing rack. I got one earlier this year, and it's a great piece of kit. Excellent. Yeah, I had this on back order for, 6 months or something. So I've just been waiting for the wing rack to come in, and I've been waiting for the wing rack before I do a whole sort of mix up of the rack that I've got. So I can pull that one up. Let me see if I can get this shelf out of the way. Yeah, get this guy. Just put this one down. Not too bad. And then we've got the wing rack. So this is the, it's not big, but it's not light either. It's got a little bit of heft to it. Let me see if we can come in here. So this is the wing rack. As I was saying, it's for you. So in my previous rack that I have over here, that would have taken up the whole of the space. More space than I want for keeping things super compact, but I just think it's going to give me a ton of I/O. So if we swing around to the back, we have, what have we got? 24 preamps, which are Midas Pro. We've got 8 outs. We've got 4 headphone outputs here. So you could run a sort of 4-person podcast very easily just by connecting to these. Some GPIOs, MIDI, And what's over this side? It's got an inbuilt SD card recorder, but it also internally can add a Dante card, which I don't have yet, but I will at some point probably do that. Partly because what I wanted to do was to, because I'm going to build out two of these with like an audio rack and a video rack. I'm going to have to connect them, and it'd be really nice just to have an Ethernet cable to connect them, so that you could either have them stacked on top of each other or spread them out across the workstation, so that you could have a dedicated audio person with access to the audio gear who's still sort of patched into the system. So that is the plan with that one. And what else we got down here? So we've got AS EBU in and out. So we've got Stage Connect. We've got AS 50, so we can add some like sort of stage boxes. This, for what I'm doing, and if I did run this remotely, I could almost use this as a stage box itself, sort of put it, closer to stage and then control it remotely. So that's sort of one option there. USB and network control here, which is where the Dante card on the inside would live. So that's kind of, plenty of room to work with. And then it's got some, on the other side here, it's got some like little rubber feet, so it sits well on a desk. Otherwise, it's got the rack ears that you could mount on the side here. And then this little knob is like you can pull this up and get a better view if you're trying to work from this sort of position of like sitting in front of it. I haven't even switched it on yet. This is, brand new. I took this plastic off because it was, a little wrinkly. But that is basically the wing rack, and I'm going to be using that more in the way of just sort of sitting in my rack sort of to the side, and then building out through Companion and Stream Deck to be able to control that and building that into the show. So at the moment I have a run of show that is somewhat reliant on the ATEM part of Companion. So like I have an audio mixer, and then the audio is coming into into the ATEM, and then Companion in my run of show is muting my microphone or turning it on, like the pre-show and then after the show, that kind of stuff. So some of that control is going to move entirely away from, the video world and into just into the wing. So that's probably like a little bit of a longer term project that we have there. Emerald also says, I stuck my wing rack in a Gator 10U with wheels and a handle. It fits well on those, but what you've picked out there looks a bit more hardy. Yeah, I think I looked at the Gator 10U wheels and handle. I was really tossing up between, should I get a bigger rack, maybe even without wheels, and just kind of put everything into one rack? And then I just sort of think of like, when you're trying to load things into, particularly in New York, like into an Uber or something to get around, it's kind of easier to break things up. And so that's where I've gone the route of two smaller racks rather than like a big beast. So, and the other thing that I like about the shallow one is that in this studio, because it's, it's not a massive space, it's like 11.5 inches, I think, rack to rack, rail to rail. So it just sort of, I've got like a equipment shelf at the back here, and it will sit more in line with that. So it's not going to like jut out too much into the studio. It'll just be a bit more flush. So I think it'll be nicer to work with that in a small space. Also because I do find when I take it to events, like ideally you have somewhere where you have a desk and you've just got like a big space to work, but there's some events that I do that are like, they've just got very small spaces for you to work in. So you kind of want to have access to things without it taking up too much space. Emerald says there are two screws for the Hyperdeck, if I recall right. The second one is further back, not side by side, as usual, pretty sure of that. They just didn't line up with the ones that I had. So let me see if I got this guy. I won't unscrew it, but let me see if I can come into my close up here. So the web presenter had these two screws lined up perfectly, and then for this for the Hyperdeck, this was the one screw here, and then the other one doesn't line up. So it just, anyway, I have one screw in it, which I thought for the amount of money you pay and the fact that it's a sort of custom shelf was disappointing. Also, I don't know, like I said, it's like, I guess they got a universal shelf that fits multiple devices, but I really wanted something that was lighter and just easier to, and shallower too. I think it's like this lip here. I really don't like that lip. But, you know, not the end of the world. Once it's in the rack, you just notice the weight. You don't notice so much the things that are inefficient about it. Emerald, thank you for all the comments here. I also split the majority of the audio into a rack of its own. Makes more sense to have both options, either stack them or be able to split them with a dedicated audio guy. Yeah, that was my thinking eventually too. So I'm still sort of working out what to do with that. I'll bring this guy back up. Let's get rid of Mr. Behringer. Let's chuck him up here on the old one. There we go, he can be partly in shot. And bring this guy back. Yeah. All right, so with the, so the wing will be 4 of the 8, and that'll leave some space for a power conditioner, and then 3 of them would be, I might put a Stream Deck Studio in there to see if we need it, if I build out some, you know, useful routing, audio routing things. Or you know, I could even put in a video monitor so that the audio person has visuals to what's happening in the program, or even some sort of, you know, preview, or, you know, see what's going to be coming. And I'm also looking at maybe getting some wireless microphones. Most of the wireless microphones that I own are more for video production. So I've got some like Sennheiser G4s. Actually, what I'm using at the moment is a Sennheiser G4, and then I just recently bought the DC power converter, which is like $70, which is, I don't know, it feels like a lot more money than it should be for what it is, but it just means that I'll be able to, for these just live streams I do in my studio, like today I'm running a lav just because I'm moving around. I normally have, I have a shotgun microphone just up here for things where I'm just sitting at the desk, but just because I was going to be off mic a lot, I just put on the lapel. But I might get some Sennheisers. So if we pull over to the Mac, let me see. So that was my video build, and then the audio side of it was going to be, so this is again the front side of the rack was going to be, the wing will take up the whole of it. Toying around with having some sort of patch panel in there for Ethernet or power, or just like something to connect the 2 racks, or maybe some sort of audio out on the front, not totally necessary. Probably a power conditioner up the top, some sort of network switch in there to, so I'll like run Ethernet from the video switch into this one. Sorry, from the video rack is going to have Ethernet out and then come into the audio, and then there'll be a little switch in here to connect the wing and Stream Deck Studio if I need it, and just, you know, other outputs. For example, if this audio rack was sitting further away and you wanted a computer plugged in as well, it just, you know, gives some options there. And then toying up with maybe some Sennheiser mics. I forget what they're called. There's some really nice, let's go back to equipment. The ones I'm looking at are probably, I've never understood this. So there's these Dante ones are $1,400. These are the ones with Dante in here for 2 channels. And then that's half a rack. Or you can get a full rack, where is that? Here, for $3,300. So, you know, instead of $2,800, you're paying, you know, $3,300. So another $500 just to have it in one, like a one use space. So the same space, I don't know, I think I'd probably end up just buying one of these. Where are we? Like half view, and then maybe trying to get an in-ear monitor for the other side of it so that I just have some sort of basic wireless in the rack that's ready to go, is kind of how I'm thinking about that. But there is also, I forget what it's called, but it looks amazing, which is the Azer Spectra, this one, which is, I think, got 64 channels and it's bi-directional. So the pack has a wireless microphone as well as the in-ear monitor in the one pack, which I'm surprised there's not more of that out there. But, you know, you're looking at $10,000 for the base station, and then each of these are, I don't know, I think they're a couple of grand or something. But this looks kind of fun, and I think if I was doing bigger gigs, maybe would do that. But it's probably a little bit of overkill for what I'm needing in my current workflow. And certainly the wing rack has tons of in and outs to just run, you know, stage mics and that kind of stuff. So pretty handy. All right, Steph, hi from Sundsvall. Did I say that right? Sundsvall, Sweden. Sundsvall, I probably said that badly. But g'day, and thanks for watching. I think that's about all the questions that we have here. So I'm in the process of pulling apart. It was interesting yesterday because I was like, all right, I just got to at some point pull the pin and pull apart the rack down here, and just, you know, once I pull apart this rack, the whole studio not necessarily falls apart, but can't really run. So it was interesting for today's show to basically take my components and put everything back together to try and run it within my companion run of show, and I was able to do that. So I guess what I haven't changed is, you know, my cameras and like the P2Z cameras in front and above, and the teleprompter, and I was able to, I think the only piece of device that I don't have a backup for is the DMX output. So I have to sort of put that one back in there, but otherwise I'm running everything else without components, so I can just spend the next couple of weeks building this out. Hopefully that will happen quickly. Might happen slowly because I do have a baby due soon, so that could just, you know, might disappear for a month or so. But that's my project at the moment, is just sort of getting this studio so I can walk in it again and consolidate all of these racks sort of, you know, into a smaller space. So that should be good. All right, I think that's about it. All right, well, hopefully that gave you an idea of where I'm up to in my conversion from a 4U to 16 U's of rack space. DavidJoshuaFord.com is my website where you can go to get some free profiles for Companion to help you get started running your studio with your, you know, live streaming equipment. Until next week, we'll give you an update on where my studio is up to. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you then.